I couldn't carry on conversations because if you said something to me and asked me 5 minutes later, what did I think about our conversation? I probably wouldn't even remember it. My short-term memory was just that bad. My brain fog was really, really bad. I had to stop working, couldn't drive anymore, and I ended up having to use a wheelchair for 9 years. So it became, I existed, but I certainly wasn't thriving, certainly wasn't feeling like there was anything better, like there was no hope. This was it. But the real health problems didn't start until 2014. Essentially, what happened was one day I was taking laundry out of the tumble dryer and I couldn't stand up. My back felt like it had just gone out. And as it turned out, I suffered a prolapsed disc in my lower back. Took a while to get the MRIs done and figure out what was happening. That kind of bulged out between my L4 and L5 vertebrae. It turns out as a result, when the disc bulged out, it caused my SI joint to dysfunction. So my left hip bone was higher than my right one. It caused my pelvic bone to tilt. And it's gotten a bit better, but it's not completely healed. Shortly after that, I developed symptoms of fibromyalgia. It's one of those things where fibromyalgia is basically, it's a diagnosis of elimination. So there were numerous trips to rheumatologists. I had to go see the GP more than once. I went to see the orthopedic surgeon several times. And they basically said it's not lupus, it's not rheumatoid arthritis, it's not all these other possible things. So all we're left with is it's got to be fibromyalgia. So that took a year of testing and seeing and visiting and wondering what was going on. And unfortunately, during that time, the pain just kept getting worse. So the inflammation was continuing to, it felt as though the inflammation was getting worse. They gave me medications for the back pain injury, but then I was taking medications to try to help the fibromyalgia pain, which I was told it was a nerve pain that was coming from brain signals. So it's not that the pain was made up, the pain was felt and it was real, but it was also sort of an oversensitivity of the body to everything else that was happening. The medication dosages were going up. The pain wasn't really getting any better. I wasn't able to do any proper exercise. My mobility was dramatically reduced. About a year after being diagnosed, I went from still working, but in a lot of pain, to I needed crutches. I had to have them to get around the house. It became harder and harder to get up and move and walk around. My brain fog was really, really bad. I had to stop working, couldn't drive anymore. And I ended up having to use a wheelchair for 9 years because that's just how inflamed and how bad the pain was on a regular basis. I couldn't get out of my house regularly unless I was in a wheelchair. So any family holidays, any trips anywhere, someone had to either push me in the wheelchair or I eventually got an electric one that I used for myself. And of course, the weight kept going up. And as I found out later, I had an underactive thyroid on top of everything else that was happening. So it just sort of like all these symptoms just continued to grow. And I was doing what I was told. I was taking all my medications. I was, eating my 5 to 10 fruits and veg a day, no red meat, keeping it low fat, all the things that are supposed to be helpful. And then I ended up with super high triglycerides. I needed to go on statins. I was on a thyroid replacement hormone. I had gained an additional 100 pounds. And I wasn't eating loads, but I was eating all of the things that for me were super inflammatory and just making everything worse, which I didn't realize at the time. Didn't know that's what it was. I just thought, well, I'm hypothyroid. I guess my weight's going to keep going up. I can't help it. Nothing I can do. The fibromyalgia pain was just to the point where I was almost considering them moving me up to, say, using morphine. The problem was I also have IBS, and the side effects would make it even worse. That was the only reason I avoided the morphine, was because it would set my IBS off. But I was taking maximum doses of everything, and I was just tired and sick and inflamed, and just the brain fog and everything was just, that was it. I figured, oh, this is horrible. I feel terrible. I have no interest in doing anything. I felt like if zombies were real, I felt like I was just a zombie in my own life. You know, my kids were teenagers at the time. I sort of mentally checked out a lot. I couldn't carry on conversations because if you said something to me and asked me 5 minutes later, what did I think about our conversation? I probably wouldn't even remember it. My short-term memory was just that bad. So it became I existed, but I certainly wasn't thriving. I certainly wasn't feeling like there was anything better, like there was no hope. This was it. They'd given me all the drugs they could. There's nothing else they could do because it was a disc bulge and not no paralysis. Surgery wasn't an option. And I was just I was stuck. I just felt really, really, really stuck for quite a few years. And that was before I finally, the light went on and I was like, wait a minute, I can change something. And it just starts with eating better food choices. I think I had to go through all of that to before I was ready because I have a sister-in-law who had struggled with severe arthritis. She went on a keto diet, worked great for her. She healed up a lot of her skin issues and she just had so much less pain. But at the time, I thought, oh my gosh, you're crazy. That's nuts. That's not going to work. None of that stuff's going to work. Whatever. I'll stick with my 6 different medications every day and I'll just chug on through life. And I'm sure I'll be kind of okay eventually. And that's what I did until I realized maybe there is a better way. Let's say May of 2020. At this point, I'm 100 pounds overweight and feeling the most inflamed and the most pain I felt ever. We found out that they were going to let us out of lockdown for a few weeks. But for that brief period, I probably looked 6 months pregnant. I felt awful and I was bloated and I was uncomfortable and I felt horrible. My husband and I were talking. We should probably both lose weight. So I thought, okay, sure. And we originally were going to try a paleo diet. His sister had been told she had Hashimoto's and she sort of changed it around through paleo. And the problem was for me, lots of seeds, lots of legumes, tons of green leafy vegetables and smoothies. Now, for some people, they do really great with these things. They thrive on these things. I can't deny that they have good health because they do. But I have horrible irritable bowel syndrome. Every single one of these food categories aggravates it. Unfortunately for me, I cannot have any of those things. I ate them because I thought maybe somehow it'll be good for me. My husband lost 13 pounds. I gained 6 in a week. Okay. And most of that was just due to bloating and water retention. But I thought, that's it, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. It's not working. So I went on YouTube. I tried to look up how can I lose weight? I can't exercise. What kind of diets are out there? And I found keto and some great videos by Dr. Ken Berry. I started watching. I learned about it. What's involved? What does it mean? Started trying it. And so for me, I think the first sort of joy moment was I made some bacon and eggs one day. And coming from an eating disorder background, that moment of, oh my gosh, I can eat these things. These are good for me. These are good fats. These are actually healthy. We need good saturated fats because we need the cholesterol. So we have good hormone balance. Fantastic. Hey. And so I kept going. And what I came to realize, and I did it for a couple of weeks, but again, if you're doing like a low carb or keto approach, the key is people still want to include non-starchy vegetables. But everything that falls into a non-starchy vegetable, spinach, broccoli, mushrooms, onions, garlic, those are all horrible if you have IBS or gut issues. Dr. Berry had a video out and he said, summarizing, of course, but his point was, look, guys, if you have gut issues, if you have IBS, IBD, Crohn's, colitis, celiac, and you don't tolerate vegetables, feel free to cut them out. It's okay. You don't have to have them. It was like I suddenly had permission to not have to eat the fruits and veg. I mean, I'd already cut out fruit anyways because of the triglyceride issue. And I'm like, oh, I love vegetables. I've always enjoyed the taste. It's just they really hate me. I like them. They do not like me back. So I have to avoid them. I can't have them. I don't tolerate them. That was it. That was the trigger moment. I'm like, oh my goodness, I have within 48 hours, less gas, less bloating, finally having regular bowel movements. I could go weeks without a bowel movement. That's how bad it was. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Even just the first couple of weeks when I was keto more than carnivore, I already noticed a massive difference. I could tell within the first few weeks. I think I lost 3 or 4 pounds in that 2 week period, which is the most weight I've ever lost in a week, I think, in my life. And of course, kept going from there. But I was feeling a little less pain, a little bit less inflamed. Within the first month, I felt like, oh, I'm starting to get my brain back. Like I could start remembering things. So at that point, it was kind of, this is actually working. So I had to do basically a complete elimination diet. Everything other than meat, red meat, chicken, pork, so poultry, pork, red meats, and egg yolks. That's what works for me. That's where I feel best. I can do egg whites now and then, but I have a lactose intolerance. And I know it's not unusual. People who have a lactose issue tend to have an issue with egg whites for something. There's something similar in the proteins. I'm okay with yolks for some reason, which is great, but don't do well with egg whites. So I kind of sort of trimmed it down a little bit over time, but that's what worked for me. Within that first 6 months, I lost the 100 pounds just with the diet. All the inflammation started to go. By the end of August that year, I felt like I had my mind back. I was 95% had my brain back. And there was still some chronic low level pain, and there was still some inflammation. After the first year, I just started to feel a little bit better and better. I didn't use crutches around the house anymore. I was still in my chair. I was still sore. I still had healing to do, but I didn't have to use crutches everywhere in the house. And I got around the house on my own 2 feet. Started to have better sleep. I noticed that my anxiety was starting to lessen. I didn't feel that sort of sense of depression as frequently. Even with an antidepressant, it was still there. After the first year, into the second year, I noticed the challenges with bulimia were starting to become less. After 3 years in, I started to think, well, wait a second, my bloods are pristine now. Like my lipids are perfect. My thyroid is functioning. I don't need a statin. I'm feeling great. But I realized maybe I don't have to always need the chair. I want to be able to walk again. So March of last year, I just thought, I want to reach a point. I reached a point where I was like, you know what? I'm sick and tired I hate having to be in a wheelchair. I mean, there was no paralysis. The disc bulge had healed by then, but the pain was still going on. And that's a whole fibro thing. So I started very, very slowly cutting back on my medication. So I've been medication free since May last year. No pain meds, no antidepressants, no statins, no thyroid medication, nothing. And it's been amazing. I felt that sense of hope when I found the videos by Dr. Berry just on keto and carnivore, and just for me, just eliminating all the stuff that in my body caused severe inflammation. So September last year, started taking little walks around the block, short walks with the dogs, felt okay, did it a few days a week, kind of slowly built up to the point where I haven't needed a wheelchair since October last year. It was probably around May of last year, well, April of last year, when I thought, maybe I don't need all this pain medication because my disc bulge has healed. Therefore, it's not causing the pain. I think the first time I walked around our block, it's not a big block, it's a small block. I walked around the neighborhood, it took me 5 minutes. And it was that moment I was like, oh my gosh, this is hope. This is possibility. Like, I can't believe I wanted the moment to be here. I wanted to see what it would feel like to go back to the life I had before the injury. Wow. I didn't think that day would come that soon. And I think if I'm being honest, I had doubts that it would come at all. Most mornings I'll start with a bit of butter and a cup of decaf because I have two wonderful dogs. We have a greyhound, we have a spaniel. Spaniel's a nut job. I'm always up around 6:37. Let them out in the morning, which is fine. But I don't necessarily feel hungry right then. So I'll make sure to eat a bit of fat and have a decaf. And then maybe in an hour or two, if I'm hungry, I'll cut up a bit of chicken breast, throw it in a frying pan with like a load of butter, put in some egg yolks and kind of mix it all together. That's breakfast. If I'm hungry at lunchtime, usually I'll do up a bit of sausage and fry that with some butter. So we have a little place in town, a guy who has a hot sausage cart. So you can either get the sausage to go or we get them from the butchers, and I'll just cut that up, throw it in the pan, throw in some butter, easy peasy. That's usually lunch. If I'm hungry. If I'm not, I don't eat. But dinner's almost always ground beef and with a bit of salt to taste, and I throw in egg yolks. I prefer the 20% fat ground beef. Whatever works. I find as a female, just getting my thyroid functioning and my hormones balanced, that higher fat I do better with. When I eat stuff that's leaner, I find I'm hungrier if I have leaner protein. So it's not like I won't eat it at all because I'm going to have chicken breast in the morning, but I have to do it with lots and lots of butter. So dinner's usually ground beef and egg yolks. Typically, sometimes ground beef with a bit of chicken breast and egg yolks, sometimes ground beef with some sausage and egg yolks. But generally speaking, ground beef and egg yolks, maybe something else. On a Friday, we'll usually get like a takeout. So I'll get kebab meat. So loads of kebab shops in our area. Most of them, you can get just the meat. So I either get the kebab donor meat, either the chicken or the beef, and I just have that like as a takeaway. So I don't have to cook. As far as pork goes, typically I stick with sausages. Bacon's great. It's just I've realized that when meat is cured or smoked, I have a bit of a histamine response. So I really don't eat a lot of bacon anymore, but it's great for most people. And any of the other cuts of pork, I just find they're a bit too lean for me. I don't find them as satisfying, as satiating, but people can have them, do well with it. And I know people love fish as well and seafood. I personally don't. I hate fish. Hate it. Just ugh, can't stand it. So I don't eat it. But that's my yuck. That's someone else's yum. So if they like it, go for it. But in the beginning stages, I got a lot of, wow, you're kind of weird. Like, how come you only eat like bacon and eggs or ground beef or meat stuff? Like, why don't you eat vegetables? What about bread? What about all the good pastas? I'm like, I can't do them. They're not going to help me. But they are nothing but supportive now. I've learned the hard way that if I do 20, 30 minutes of walking, I feel great and I'm fine. But because of my SI joint pain, which I've had for years, if I try to push myself to do more than that at once, then it starts to get sore. So it's kind of me finding that balance between nice, comfortable walking and I've got to do 5 miles right now for no particular reason. And it's like, no, it can't be all or nothing, just some good, gentle walking.
Hello, everybody. Meghan here, the Healing Foods Coach. Just out with my favorite four-legged guys for a morning walk and wanted to wish you all a happy first day of October. Hope you're all doing well. Take care. Have great days. I'll catch up with you in the next video. Bye.
So I think for whatever else happens with life, we have to be our own advocates. We have to be. I mean, respectfully, with kindness, and with the understanding that people in the medical field really, for the most part, want the best for us, but they can miss things. They can misdiagnose, and they don't always have all the answers. And many of them will tell you, I don't have all the answers. The other thing is that, as I've found in 4 years, it is incredible how our bodies are made, that we are created in such a way that we can heal so many things, and we don't necessarily need medication always. A lot of it comes simply by our diet alone, which to me is mind blowing. But if you think about it, you think back to our ancestors where they did not have things like rampant anxiety and depression and health issues and hormone imbalances. Why? Because they were eating a species appropriate human diet. They were eating the things that were nourishing them. They were cutting out the things that were not good for them. They certainly weren't eating all kinds of processed inflammatory junk food. And so a lot of the stuff we have today is, I mean, I've been a Christian just over 30 years. When I was at university, I have always had a faith, but when I got injured, I never stopped believing in God. I never stopped having faith in God, never stopped believing in God, but I wouldn't say that I was always walking in faith or close to Him. And especially after the injury, it was really weird. I had this thought about 3 months after the back injury that somehow God wants to use this for something good. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know when that was going to happen. That was just a thought I had. And it kept me going. It gave me that last little bit of kind of just hope over the years. Somehow this is going to be used for something better. And it has been. The more I healed and the more my brain fog went, the more joy I felt, because here I was connecting back with my spiritual higher power, my God. It felt amazing. And that helped me with my faith, and that helped me to have hope, because I realized there was something far greater than me, and that things can heal and things can happen for the better, even if I'm not the one trying to orchestrate it. I always felt like I'm in control. I'm in control. And let's be honest, the reality is we're really not in control. We have very little control of what happens in life. We think we do. We really don't. The more I realized that the healing, I was eating the right way, which is great. I was losing weight, which is fantastic. I was healing, which is amazing. But then I realized I might be eating right, but all the other healing, that's my God, that's my creator doing that. And if we don't look outside ourselves and we only rely on ourselves and our own strengths, well, then we can very easily fail. Because I don't know, for me, every time I thought, I can diet, I can lose the weight, I can get over my food addictions, I can heal from being bulimic. When I relied on my own self, it didn't work. It never worked. But when I realized there's something beyond me that wants me to heal, that can help me get through this, that's what made the difference. Fix the diet, whatever your spiritual power or higher power is, whether it's God or someone else, I think that's important too.